Your business is in sync with LiveSync. This webinar is powered by LiveSync Accounting and Xero Accounting Software. Introducing Attorney Dexter Destajo.
The payroll, okay? So we'll discuss access, we'll discuss setup of items, understanding what are the system accounts, we'll go through the pay run dashboard, the process of actually doing the pay run, copying the pay run reports, discuss limitations, and then add-ons, okay? So let's jump into our module. So to find this module, you have to go to pay run here. Now, you might ask yourself why it is called pay run, not payroll. This is because, as you know, Xero is founded in New Zealand, and down under they normally call this pay run rather than payroll, but it's all actually the same. So in this case, my access is not yet a payroll admin access. So it is very important to know that only people with, regardless of your permission, you need to get a separate payroll admin access to be able to manage pay run in Xero. So what I would do now is go to the advanced setting, then go particularly to my user, and then I would upgrade my user here. Change permission. I would add payroll here, and then I would add myself as an advisor, and then be able to add user, update my user access, and then now I can go to my payroll, and then I would be able to start the managing the payroll. Now, the first thing we need to do is to actually set up the pay run, because this is the first time we're doing the payroll in Xero. So what I would do is first is actually set up your tax pay item. So if we're doing the Philippines, okay, so that's the agency. And then how frequently you're paying, let's say we're doing monthly, does not really matter. But that's an option for you. That's just a default. Then let's say I'm paying on June 30 the next. Then we save this. We've set up the first pay items, okay? Now, let's talk about pay items versus pay run. Pay items are basically the line items that you would want simply to show up in your payslip. So, for example, your business is issuing a payslip to your staff, and then in that payslip, there are items then that you would want to show up. Example, the basic salary, the allowances, maybe the employee deductions, because he's paying you are deducting the advance of the employee or the loan. Another deduction would be the contributions, okay, SSS, Pag-ibig, PhilHealth, you can also, and then the tax also that will show up in the payslip. So before you be able to do that, you have to set that separately this particular item. So we will start setting that up now. So I'll go to manage pay items. So as you can see, Xero has already set up for us two basic pay items. So the pay run, which we are doing now. So here, Bureau of Internal Revenue, that is the supplier. Here, I would want to change this and edit this to basic salary. And then the description, it's up to you. You can do whatever description. So normally I just copy the name. The next, you'd have to decide what type of pay item is this. In Xero, you have different type that you can select. It's a wages, it's an allowance, deduction, taxes, non-taxable allowances, post-tax deductions, or employee contributions. So for this item, we are adding wages. And then the next thing is we have to select what type of expense account we are charging this particular pay item. So we use wages and salaries at this level. Now, this is optional. It's up to you if you would use multi or ordinary. It's up to you, but I leave that as blank now. And because this is item, I want to show this to all payslip items of all employees, that I would take this as a default for all employees. I'll save this item now. Next is I would want to create allowances. Now, in my case here, I don't have an allowance chart of account, so very quickly, I'll go first to my chart of account and then add that very quickly, that chart of account, so that once I set up, I'll be able to admit that in the system, or as an option that I can select from the system. It would be an ordinary chart of account. So this would be an expense. And then let's say this is, I'll put this of 521 as a code. And then I would say employee allowances. I can copy that, and then this is no VAT. I will leave this, and I would not actually take as anything from this account. I've set that up already. I'll refresh this so that it would update the back end of the pay run. Then I am ready now to create my allowances account. Pay items. Then I select allowances here, and then I can select allowances on this as an account, and then I leave this as a default for all employee. Let's go on and adding all other pay items. So for example, I'll do salary deduction, for example. I'll copy that. Now this time, this is just a basic deduction. Look at it, will change. I leave that, it's a default with 00. But then I would also want to put in the contact for this. So if you're using a deduction type, it would not ask you for an expense account, but it would ask you to put or input in the contact name. Why? Because the system account that is being linked on this system is actually accounts payable. Okay, why it says accounts payable? Because we need, at the later part, we need to close the deduction against an asset account already been disbursed before the deduction, obviously. So what I would do now, very basic, so that I would not forget, I would copy the same name as my contact names. Okay, frequency of payment, let's say monthly, and the next payment 10. And then I would not select this as a default item in the payslip. So I save that. Then I'll do also the contributions very quickly. I would say SSS contribution. Right, so this is not employer contribution, so I would know that this is non-taxable employer, so this is not an employer contribution. I would use basically a deduction here, and then I would use social security system. Okay, frequently it would be monthly for you, and then the next payment would be June 30. Again, I would use that as a default in the pay items. Let's add the pag-ibig. Now, I'm using these items using as a deduction, actually, because we don't have an employee deduction contribution in the selection, because that's only for the employer and it would have a different effect. So we're not using that. Again, deduction, and then I would use pag-ibig fund monthly as well. Next payment, this one. And then I'll do finally the PhilHealth contribution. Again, it is a deduction. And then I would say PhilHealth. And then this is monthly. Then this is this one. Again, also a default. So all the pay items we need to show in our payslip are already here. Now we are ready now to start our first payroll. Now, in our dashboard right now, nothing is still there because we have not done our first batch of payroll. So once we do that, we would be able to see in our dashboard what are those payrolls that we have done under stocks. So we do the first pay run now. I go new pay run. Okay. So the first thing you need to do if you are doing this the first time is actually adding the employee. Okay. So I would add employee Giancarlo. Let's have only three employees. Peter Rogers. And then I will do another one, Elisa Reyes. Okay. So these are just dummy names. These are not real people as far as I'm concerned. Maybe they're real people, but there's no intention to actually use them that way. So I can add more, it's up to you. But then if I have 3 employees only, if you're also a user, you can add yourself here. You can take this and you're automatically added, but otherwise I'm not adding myself here. So then step 1 would be setting up the date. How frequently are you doing the payroll? So in the Philippines, every 2 weeks we're doing that. And then starting from June 1 to June 15. And then your P date would be 15. Now, there's something I need to explain on this payment date. And because this is a common problem to many Xero users. Now, the date that you have to input in payment date should be the date within your accrual period or reporting period. I understand, for example, if this payroll is June 1 to June 30, and then the payment is actually done after June, with let's say July 2, July 3, and people would start putting this the actual date of payment. This is wrong, and we do not recommend doing this. Instead, use the June 30, because what you would want that this pay run, the expenses of this pay run will reflect on the June pay run. In Xero, I mean in June profit and loss, in Xero, the date that you are posting here would be your posting date in your ledger of this pay run. So if you put that in July 2, then your entire expense amounts will be booked in the P&L of your July. So I know sometimes we pay salaries after the cutoff date, but my suggestion, ignore the actual date of payment and just make sure you input here the right date within the P&L period you want this payroll to reflect. So in my case, I use June 15, and it is for our firm, our policy would always be whatever is the date in the 2 here would be this is the date that we will input in this system. So then I can go to the next step, actually entering now the salary of each of the employees. So if you've noticed, because I've taken that default orders item and the pay items, these are showing in all of my employees' pay slips. Okay, you can edit the employee here. If you want to put more information, you can do that. But for now, let's put in the details. So now we're paying the first 15 days of the salary. So for Elisa Reyes, we're paying 60% of his whole compensation as basic, and then 40%, okay, for his allowance. So if we say 8,000 is his total compensation, Xero would calculate directly the amounts. And you would see this part here, technically, this is how it looked like in your payslip. Next would be PhilHealth. So normally I would do 1 here, and let's say I'm not very sure of the amount. What I would do is 125. Maybe that is the employee contribution. Pag-ibig would be also 100. And then SSS, maybe we are paying 355, for example, for this person. And then there's no withholding tax on this. There's no tax for this, so I delete this for this particular person. I will proceed to the next person, which is Giancarlo. The same thing, 6 and then 40%. And then his salary would actually also be 20,000. So in 15 days, he's receiving 10,000 for that particular cutoff. His share here would be the same. So let's say you would have 165. I'm just putting the numbers here. I'm not really calculating, may not be calculating properly, but this is just for our illustration purposes. And this guy, we don't have a payroll tax for this because he is not, his yearly income is not is still covered with the exemption. So I leave that also blank. And then finally, Rogers, this is the manager. We're paying him 15,000 per month. So what I would do again, because maybe as a policy for this company, 60% and 40% basic salary and allowances respectively. He's paid 30,000 per month. His salary would be split into 15,000. His PhilHealth would now be, let's say, 625. Pag-ibig, maybe, I don't know, still 100. And then SSS most probably would be, let's say, 845. And then because we will have to do taxes for this guy, maybe the tax for him would be 1,250. So you would notice all these transactions now will be updated in the system. Okay. Now we have entered everything. We are now ready to view our report as a draft. So this is now how it would look like right now. You have a portion here of your employee. How much is the wages type, the allowances type, the deduction type, and the taxes. And then at the bottom, you would see the different contacts that we need to remit this amount particularly. So you have the SSS, Pag-ibig, PhilHealth, and the Bureau of Internal Revenue. Now, what I would want is to save this as a draft. Okay, I'm saving this as a draft. When you look at your payroll now, you would see now that first line of your payroll showing a drop here. Okay, we can always go back because it's still a draft. We can edit many of this. So let's say Peter Rogers, we have given him an advance in the past, in the beginning of the month of around 2,000 pesos. So I would type Peter here and look at what was the initial entry I created for him. So we created a spend money for him. I created a banking transaction for this guy because we disbursed from our petty cash 2,000. So we recorded initially on June 1 an asset entry of advances to staff. So if you're looking at the balance sheet right now, let's look at the balance sheet as is before we proceed on this report. So there is an outstanding advances to employee of 2,000 in our balance sheet. And then an agreement with Peter Rogers, we are going to deduct this on his current salary. So how would you do that? Take note, I have already recorded this, okay, as a transaction under my petty cash account, peso account. So I would want to do is edit. So to edit the particular employee salary or pay run, I would edit from here. Take note, you can only edit the pay run if the pay run has not been paid. If the pay run has been paid, it will lock you out from editing. So if you want to edit after recording the payment, remove the payment first before you're doing the editing. So now I still be able to edit this because we're still a draft. I would want to add the deduction. So deduction, the salary deduction. See here, there's a drop down here. I see all the pay items, but for now I would want to do an deduction. So here I would want to deduct the 2,000, and you would realize that it is a negative entry added in your pay item. So I would save and continue editing just to make sure I would not forget that. And then I am now ready to approve this. Now, this is already approved. Let's look at your balance sheet right now. What's going on with your balance sheet? Your balance sheet actually, the advances is still there because we have not completed the process for closing the advances. You would notice that the creditable withholding tax is showing up here. Your wages payable is this amount because that would match for your here, this particular amount. Okay. Now let's look at the accounts payable because, as I said earlier, the P items that are deductions and contributions are linked to the accounts payable transactions. So when you look at your accounts payable transaction, this would include also the contacts for your deductions here. This is how much we need to pay for Pag-ibig, for Trimple PhilHealth, and then SSS. And then you notice this particular transaction salary deduction, it's showing still in our accounts payable. Therefore, when you are completing all this after you approve, okay, the pay run, maybe 2 to 3 steps that still needs to be done. The first one would be to actually pay the pay run. And then number 2, closing all this particular payable, right? So that's another step. And then number 3, maybe sending the pay slip to your employee. So let's do the next step. So now what I would want to do is to start paying the employee. Now you can pay the employee either by, what you call this, either by cash or by bank. It's up to you. So what we would want to do is that for this transaction, I would pay one person in the bank, and then the rest I would pay this a transfer to the payroll account, for example, or I'll do a batch payment. So in this case, you would also notice that all these payables that is showing our aging are also showing up in our bills dashboard, all this including the employee. So you can make the payment directly from here, like a normal bill, and you would know the distinction because it is a PR, meaning pay run. That's the reference, and then you have that small images of people or person. That means that is coming from, entered from your pay run. You can actually make payment from here. This is one method. From your bill, this would show up your payroll, okay? And then you can pay it directly from here. Other way of doing that is you can also click from here. Okay, and then it's the same window. So I would pay this on the 15, and then I would pay this from my petty cash, for example. So my petty cash voucher number 135, maybe that's the number. I close this. I'll update my pay run. What would happen? Only one line is being paid. Okay, so that's one option. You can pay one by one the employee. The other option of making payment is doing a batch salary. So maybe you issue a check from your bank and then you encash that with the bank and then you manually give this to your employee separately. So because the money came out from the bank as one check, you have to record this as one particular entry in the bank because that is how it will be reconciled later. And then what happened to the encashment, that would not be part of our recording right now. So I'm just making this simple. I'm issuing a check. This could be check number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. If you think you are paying partially only to this employee, you can say I would pay only 9,000. You can edit that. Otherwise, you put the entire amount if you're paying the full. For our purpose of this demo, I would have to do the full amount of all this employee. I make the payment and then I would have the batch payment for the salary. Okay, so that is how it is being done now. Then I can go back to my pay run now, how it would look like in my dashboard. I have fully paid this employee, this particular pay run. Okay, all the employee, it's all paid. Okay, what I can do now would be to send payslip to individually. So I'll click the send payslip. You can take everybody and send the email. Okay, or you would want to send the payslip individually, print it, or by email. You can email that directly to your employee, or you can print it as a PDF. Now, just be reminded that the payslip is not part of the templates. No, what you see here is this is the information it will be printed from your payslip. Now, if you want to put in your logo and everything else, I suggest you print this using your letterhead, and then maybe you sign this or stamp this to validate the payslip. So this is how the payslip now would look like to your employee. Basic allowances, and then the deduction is showing up very clearly, and what was the take-home pay. Okay, very easy. Another step, the next step would actually now settling all the other payments. So if you see, you have the BIR, the Pag-ibig PhilHealth, salary deduction that needs to be closed, and then the Social Security. So what you need to do now is treat them as individual bills. Okay. Now, when you are going to remit this amount to this particular supplier's contacts, okay, you pay them normally as how you are paying the bill. So let's say in BIR, at the end of the following month, you are actually going to pay this. So then, you know, you issue a check. So then you apply the payment for this particular transaction. So let's say BIR, okay, I would be paying the BIR at the end of the month. So what I would do is I would just do June 30, and then I paid from the bank, and then I would say check number 2564, right? I can do that. Then I pay that. The same thing with your SSS Pag-ibig. When you're remitting, you just pay the accounts payable. However, there is one particular transactions you have there. So I'll update the status, and it would say which one is paid. So it's paid. This salary deduction. Now going back to your balance sheet, what happened is your balance sheet is showing you an asset. So I'll update this now. Up to this point, your balance sheet is still showing you the 2,000 advance. It's still not closed. At the same time, part of your accounts payable is also the 2,000, which is sitting in your aging payable here. So what you want to do is pay the salary deduction bill using the advances, staff advances account. Okay. Now, this is actually a workaround that we've discovered, and we've been using this a lot and many times, because there's no other workaround to do this if you want to include salary deduction in your payslip. So what I would do, I would select the salary deduction, and I should have to, and you should have to do this every end of the month. Otherwise, your balance sheet is overstated as far as the advance is concerned, and then your accounts payable is also overstated. So you need to close both of the accounts. So what I would do, I would select, let's say June 30, that is the date that I would close that, and then I use advances to staff. Remember last week, we have set up advances to staff chart of account and enable the payment. And that's why it's showing up in our drop down as one of the payment option. So I'd select that and go ahead, and then I would just say closing the staff advances as my reference. That's how I do it. Then save that. I close now my payslip. This is closed, and let's look at your accounts payable now. Is your accounts payable still showing the salary deduction? No more. So let's look at your balance sheet now. Let's update your balance sheet. It's gone. See, it's gone. So now you've closed the accounts payable side, because like I said, the deduction, the default is the accounts payable system account. So you have to manually close this towards the end of the month so that you'll be able to close that off, that particular transaction. Now, if you'd want to, let's say, look at the ledger, or the advances, yep, this will tell us now that there's a debit and credit. You can export this Excel if you are tracking separate advances for each employee. No, there's no other way of doing this in Xero. It's just that you have to create advances of account. Many companies would actually create separate chart of accounts per employee. So staff advances to staff to Peter Rogers, another account advances staff to Eliza. We do not recommend that because you're cluttering the chart of accounts. What you need to do is you just have to be very specific of the names, and then you can reconcile this in the Excel outside of Xero, and then you'll have to maintain separate Excel sheets for, unfortunately, for each of the employee. There's no other way of tracking this. In the advanced payroll of other Xero versions in New Zealand, Australia, and UK and US, they have a separate and very much advanced payroll system than what we have in the Philippines, because the Philippines is using the global version, and there's other versions that are higher payroll features. Now we have done that and successfully closed our advances. You can do the same for your Pag-ibig, but I would not do Pag-ibig. It's now for on another period, so I leave that now as open. Now here comes at the end of the month, you need to pay again your second batch. So what do? Do you need to create again from scratch? No. You have an option here to create a scratch, for example, or you can copy an existing pay run. You can select the pay run that you would want to copy. So I would copy the latest one. That's how you create the next pay run. The only difficult thing about payroll is actually at the beginning. When you set it up at the beginning properly, then you can just copy it on the next pay run. So what I would do now, I would select the proper cutoff again within the accrual period that I want to show up in my P&L. You will see I would be copying a lot of details here, but because this is the second portion, I would want to remove all other items here which are not already applicable, because otherwise I would be charging them twice this deduction. So I would just be showing a normal salary for them. I'll click next. I'll check again how it is now. Okay, I still have an SSS PhilHealth, from whom I will go back. I'll delete the PhilHealth. I have PhilHealth for someone. Okay, I'll click that and then click next. Okay, there's no more deduction. Unless, of course, you still have deductions, you can show up that. Nothing here for other things. Now I can approve that, and then I'm ready to make the next payment process. So that is for pay run for now. Okay, so that's how you go about pay run.